Hey guys, thank you very much for joining us here on timforrest.com. I'm really excited today to speak with Enrique Fiallo. He's provided me a lot of value in prior conversations, and I just thought that it would be valuable to you. Enrique, thank you so much for joining us here on timforrest.com.
It's my pleasure, Tim. Thanks for having me.
The reason I brought you is really because of your background. It's really unbelievable. You've achieved some things that many people in the world have never accomplished, along with your life experience and stories are really incredible and fantastic. And out of that, you've created this incredible decision-making matrix for executives and for folks to use. And I think it's so important for the food industry because there's so many decisions to be made in food. Do you want to share a little bit about your background?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to do that. So I've got about 45 years in the business world of the positions I've held at different companies. Taught me a lot, and actually made a lot of mistakes, which taught me even more. And so some years ago, I had the opportunity that not too many people get. I was able to take a company public. So I did a spinoff of a subsidiary of a New York Stock Exchange listed company, and I went ahead and did a roadshow and took the company public. Rang the bell at the New York Stock Exchange.
I was just curious. What was the value? What was the valuation of the business, or how much money did you raise for the business, and what sort of annual revenue was the business when all this happened? Can you give me some insight, or give us some insight?
Sure. I don't remember the valuation, but I do remember that we were at a $500 million run rate revenue-wise when we went public. And so it was kind of unusual because, most startups, they don't have a lot of revenue, and they're just starting out. They're heavily investing. We had 2,000 employees, worldwide operations, worldwide customers. And so it was a subsidiary of a company that I spun off and took public, went ahead and hired key executives, appointed a board of directors, et cetera. $500 million run rate. So it was a pretty big deal, pretty big company. And up until then, my experience had been on the technology side of business. I had been a chief information officer at various companies. And I think the management of the parent company here thought that because of that experience, I was the right person to become the CEO of this spinoff. And let me tell you something, it was a heady experience. And that's probably an understatement. Going on a 2-week roadshow, talking to analysts, investors, fund managers, meeting after meeting after meeting, and then culminating in the New York Stock Exchange, ringing the bell, going public, going on the floor, buying the first 100 shares of my newly traded company, being interviewed by Bloomberg and MSNBC and CNN Financial. It was really heady stuff. And probably that's what led to some of the difficulties that I encountered, that I really wasn't ready. I really totally underestimated the size of that role and the fact that I didn't have perhaps the background to really execute the role and to make good decisions. So let me switch now into the bad side of this, because all of that was great. Here I am, a Cuban immigrant that came to this country with nothing in 1958, ended up becoming the CEO of a New York Stock Exchange listed company. It's just kind of like the pinnacle of success, right? And so it started going in my head, made really some bad decisions,
what are
bad
some
ethical decisions.
What are some examples, or what are some clues that we would see for us to not, that you said it started to go sideways or started to go the wrong way? You just mentioned decisions, but what are some things when you're those heady days that you were talking about? Were there any little hints that you would be able to share with us that maybe we could avoid those?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So, the good part of this is that on the technology side, because this was a technology company, I really understood the process of producing product, getting it to market, designing it, architecting it, and then selling it. I had a lot of sales experience in my days with AT&T selling technology. The bad part of it was, and this is where the hints come in as to something's going wrong. You're faced with decisions you've never even seen before. So you have no background in making that decision. And instead of employing a decision-making framework, which is what I ended up realizing you needed to have in order to make good ethical decisions, I was flying by the seat of my pants. I was being mentored by the wrong people. I didn't really have people that were counseling me in the areas where I had no expertise. So a hint, a dead giveaway is when you start being faced with decisions you've never seen before and you don't quite know how to navigate through them. And that's where you ought to slam on the brakes, take a step back, and employ a decision-making framework that includes surrounding yourself with people that you trust that could help you make those decisions. So the dead giveaway there was I was being confronted with decisions I had never had to make before in my total career. And that should have been a dead giveaway for me. It's like, hey, you don't have any expertise here. Tread carefully, because if you start down a slippery slope, it's too late to recover.
Wow, that's awesome. And then that's awesome that you have that insight. And then that's what generated. How quickly did you generate the decision matrix that you've put together?
Well, so shortly after we went public, maybe after the second quarter, we started to run into some difficulties, and I ran afoul of the law with my decision making, and I violated some Securities and Exchange Commission laws, and I ended up taking a plea. I ended up being sentenced to 48 months in a federal prison. So during those 48 months in that prison is when I started to analyze what went wrong and what I could have done differently. By the way, I met a lot of people during that time in prison, including ex-CEOs, attorneys, politicians, doctors, you name it, a wide array of people, and really talked to them a lot about the decisions they made and how they went wrong. And that's when I started putting together that decision-making framework, because what I realized is you need that framework before you make decisions. Once you're faced with decisions, if you don't have a framework, and we can talk about the framework here whenever you're ready, then you're making decisions on the fly, the seat of your pants, without having really a platform to stand in order to make good ethical decisions.
You're welcome. The reason that all of this expense, all of this life history, all of this experience resulted in you creating this decision matrix. What is it? How does it work? Or what can you share? How can you share it with us?
Okay, and it's actually pretty simple, and some people are going to listen to it and say, oh, well, that's fairly obvious. But, you know, a lot of times we don't implement the obvious. It's so obvious that we don't bother to implement it. We think we can do without it, or we can just, you know, wing it, if you will. So here's what the decision-making framework looks like. The very first thing you do, because what you want to do is put yourself in a position when you're faced with a decision to make sure that you've made the highest ethically possible decision you can, the best decision, not just for yourself, because you could look at this from a family standpoint, a personal standpoint, or a business standpoint. You could even look at it as to, you know, you're the head of a spiritual organization, or you're on the board of a nonprofit or something, and you want to make good ethical decisions. So the very first thing you do is to establish a set of core values. The core values is what's going to guide you through the decision-making process. So, for example, one of my top core values is integrity. The reason is, obviously, I lost my integrity when I was sentenced to 48 months in prison. And let me tell you something, it's really tough to recover a loss of integrity, a loss of reputation, if you will. You got to work 3 times as hard to recover what you had before when you lost it due to these kinds of situations. So you establish a set of core values. For example, some core values might have to do with your responsibility towards the environment And if you're running a company, to make sure that you are either green or carbon neutral, or you're paying attention to your packaging, etc. So integrity might be a core value. Your view of the environment might be another core value. How you treat your employees, how you treat your customers. So once you establish those core values, if you're running a company, they have to be company-wide. Everybody has to buy into them. You have to, as the leader, you have to walk the talk. So you establish it. Hopefully you've engaged some of your key people to help you establish the core values so that they feel ownership. It's not something you're shoving down their throat, but something that they've helped to create. Then you communicate it across the company, and every one of your practices ought to be based on the core values. For example, when you interview people and when you hire them and when you onboard them, you need to make sure that they understand what the core values are. When you enter into contracts, your decisions ought to be based on those core values so that you don't go the wrong way, go the wrong path. Whatever the business process is, those core values help you to make the right decisions as you are going through that process. So those core values help you to make those decisions, right? And so what you do is you take each decision, and again, minor decisions, you're not going to use this framework in all probability, but medium to large type serious decisions, you're going to use this framework, because what you're going to do is you're going to take the decision and look at the potential outcomes, some potential alternatives. And then you're going to say, okay, what does that outcome look like? What does that outcome look like? Oh, that's a potential bad outcome. There could be a fine. There could be a loss of reputation. There could be if you're a professional, a loss of your certification, the loss of an engineering certification or a CPA type certification. Or if you're a lawyer, I was in jail with a lot of lawyers who lost their licenses. I mean, that's a potentially serious outcome. So as you look at the decisions you're going to make, you go all the way through to the outcome and you go, good outcome or bad outcome? Bad outcome. Ooh, I'm going to scratch that one. I'm going to saw that limb off. Not going down that path. And so you end up with then a set of decisions that are ethically sound based on your core values.
Do you,
Go ahead.
So right off the bat, the beauty of this is you do this before you're in the middle of a decision, the heat of a decision or problem. This is done early.
Exactly.
So there's no emotion in creating these. And then the second piece, do you have like a piece of paper or like a laminated sheet that you have on your desk? What's the physical how do you physically run through these values as you make the decision? I mean, what do you actually do? How do you actually incorporate this into your decision process?
Well, so, I think a laminated set of core values is a great thing to do as long as you're serious about it and it doesn't become shelfware. In other words, you're paying lip service to it and you're not really serious about it.
Well, do you just memorize them and you just go through, well, how do you go down the list? Or do you have a list on your computer? Well, I mean, if you have these core values.
Yeah. I do. And so I basically go right down, hey, is this a sacrifice of my integrity and my principles?
Yep.
Is this going to violate environmental kinds of issues if I make this decision?
Okay.
Is this going to cost me time away from my family? Because family is one of my core values, as an example. And so you go down the list, and again, that's why I say you're not going to use it for, what do I have for breakfast in the morning?
Right.
But you are going to use it for an acquisition, a contract, a deal that you're trying to strike, an acquisition that you're trying to make of another company, whatever the complex decision making is, the design of a product, where that product is going to be manufactured, all those things based on your core values, they're going to lead you to the right kind of ethical decision. Then when you really run into a tough one where it's kind of dicey, because what you're trying to do, by the way, here is to eliminate the gray areas in your decision making, and you're trying to keep the decision in black and white terms. It's easy to make a decision in black and white terms. White is good, black is bad. When there are gray areas, then the gray areas is where you get in trouble. People start wandering into the gray areas of decision making, and they try and justify the decision. This is why you have to have the framework done ahead of time, so that the decision itself doesn't color, your core values, and you don't start getting into gray areas. It's strictly black and white. But then the other part of the framework is to establish a set of people that you have vetted that stand for the same things you stand for, where you can observe that they walk the talk, and use them as sounding boards and as mentors, if you will, on the really tough decisions. So if you're going to make an acquisition, you're going to talk to people that have made acquisitions before and have been successful at it.
Do these have to, well, so you don't know necessarily, you don't know what your issues are going to be ahead of time because of what you shared earlier. So these mentors, are they flexible depending on the issue, or do you reach out to new mentors, or you seek new advice? How do you do that in the heat of a decision or problem?
Well, seeking somebody new, that's a great question. Seeking somebody new that you've never talked to before in the middle of a decision is probably not a good idea, because you haven't had time to really check them out, talk to them, observe them, see what kind of, if you're lucky enough to talk to Bill Gates or a Warren Buffett and get them to advise you, you're probably on pretty safe ground because those guys are ethically sound. But you're probably talking about people, for example, maybe it's your board of directors, maybe it's your audit firm and you're talking to an audit partner or a tax partner that has a lot to lose if they advise you incorrectly or if you make a wrong decision, because these guys' reputation is everything and their licensing is everything to them. And so you want to do it ahead of time, and you want to do kind of a cross section, if you will. Somebody with legal expertise, somebody with accounting and financial expertise, somebody with environmental expertise, etc.
Yep.
A set of what I call voices of value that you can rely on to talk to you about the decision that you're trying to make.
Great. So we've got our core values. We've got people to reflect or bounce our decisions off of and get some visibility or possible eliminate blind spots, and also just give us feedback on that. So what's the next step after that? So we've run it through our checklist. We've spoken to our people, and so what do we do next? What's the next step?
Look at the alternatives that surfaced from the process. In other words, because you might have one of the things might be obvious, and so that's the decision you make. But there may be multiple alternatives here, and now you're starting to weigh them economically, or you're starting to weigh them based on the factors that are important to your company. Key strategic decision and acquisition, financial impact, good value versus bad value, better return on investment, etc. And then, so you're looking at all the good ethical choices, and you're making them based on your business goals and objectives, whether it's strategy, financial impact, return on investment, etc. And then you make the decision, communicate it to everybody, and now everybody's on board, and you go forward.
Do you have any advice on? You said communicate it to everyone. Make the decision. Communicate to everyone. Do you have any insights, any suggestions on that? Do you do it quickly, slow, wait a week, wait any period of time?
Yeah, it really depends on, if you're about to do an acquisition, you probably don't want to talk about it until you've actually done it, because there's obviously a competitive risk there if it gets out. And obviously there's all kinds of, insider, if you're a public company, insider trading issues, etc. And so you don't want to make people insiders unless they understand what it means to be an insider, and then not go out and buy more stock, just before the decision is made. So it really depends from a timing perspective on the type of decision that you're making, the type of impact it can have, and whether or not you need to hold things confidential until you actually announce it. But eventually you should communicate it broadly. And by the way, the decision-making framework is something you want to communicate to everybody and make sure that people understand no tolerance for the failure to follow the core values. And so if you do find a violation, you have to treat it swiftly, humanely, but swiftly, so that people understand, hey, there's no tolerance here. You violate one of these core principles, core values like integrity, and you're gone. So that needs to be communicated. But with respect to the decision, it's going to be based on how sensitive the decision is in terms of your business, your competitive situation, etc.
Enrique, do you have anything on your website or any resources that people might be interested in for making better decisions? I know you've helped so many people, executives, to make great decisions with this process. Do you have anything if people want to look at this, see this online somewhere, or get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can go to fiallo.com, www.fiallo, F as in Frank, IALLO.com, and see, because that's my speaking website, because I'm a public speaker and an author. I'm in the process of finishing up a book on ethical decision making. And I also have an ebook that I'm trying to put together quickly here, which would be exactly the type of reference that you are referring to. And I just don't have that completed yet, but I will soon, and it'll be available on my website.
By the time folks see this, chances are very good it'll be on your website. Would they just go to your site and there'll be a link to download it when it's available, or is it on a blog?
Yeah. No, it'll be a link. It'll say, hey, in exchange for signing up and registering on my website, because obviously I'm trying to build a mailing list. I'll offer the ebook at no charge for free. And the ebook is I think going to offer a lot of value, because eventually I'm going to turn that ebook into a course as well. I'm working on a course,
Awesome.
Self-paced course that would let people understand the framework itself, how to put it together, all the elements that we just talked about.
That's awesome, Enrique. This is such a valuable topic. I know in my food, the decisions are so important. I know that I lost a massive piece of business, and probably one of the largest projects in my career. I lost it to a competitive team in another company. They ended up going to jail for fraud, the people that took that business away from me. I know exactly. And I'm sure that you shared with some insight. I'm sure that they thought possibly maybe they didn't go through this framework, and that's why they ended up there. Also, there's a lot of folks in the food business that there's government bidding, and there's a lot of bids involved in the food industry. So this is very important that people make ethical decisions and really not cut corners in order just to have short-term gains.
You just hit the nail on the head there as to one of the issues that could get you in trouble: cutting corners, taking shortcuts, and then having it cost you. And in the food industry, a perfect example is food safety.
Oh yeah.
To make sure that you don't cut corners there. Very important there, because you could get into trouble. You could kill people. You could actually cause people to lose their lives with respect to a food safety issue. Yeah.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. There's so many serious issues. So this is so.
I spent 8 years working for Subway. I spent 8 years working for Subway. The sandwich chain.
Yep.
44,000 stores in over 100 countries worldwide. And let me tell you, food safety was of paramount importance to us.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and just it's just really exciting to get the framework from you, Enrique. And I know this is going to provide a lot of value to food executives, folks, food entrepreneurs, and people in the food arena. So thank you very much for sharing this. And I know this was so expensive for you to reach the point to be able to share this with people, but it's a tremendous benefit and helpful for folks. So thank you so much for being here on timforrest.com.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Awesome. I enjoyed it as well, Enrique. And thank you, everyone that joined and watched us at timforrest.com. If you're seeing this anywhere else except timforrest.com or on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/timforrest consulting, be sure to go over there and like and/or subscribe. And I'd love to hear your notes about what we discussed today. Also, visit Enrique, and there's down below, I'll have the links to his site as well, fiallo.com. And again, thanks a lot. Have a great day, Enrique.
Take care.